Hello! That was a little bit excessive, but I'm very, very excited to start the course. So in this section, we're going to be talking about browsing the web. It's the first part in the How the Internet Works section. And some of you are thinking right now, whoa, Andre, like, come on. I know how the internet works. Let's get to the heavy, technical stuff. But this is something that actually took me quite a few years to learn. And I see a lot of people just skimming the surface of this stuff without fully understanding how everything works together. Without having those foundations, it's actually very, very difficult to think about performance, optimizing your site, and so on and so on. So we're going to start off very, very basic, and we're going to learn something that it took me many years to learn. And once I figured this out, everything clicked. So just hang in there. Trust me. I promise you, you'll learn something new in this section. And we're going to be talking about browsing the web. We have over here a laptop, and we have our web browser, let's say Google Chrome. And we typically like to say, go to Google, and we're going to visit Google. So we type in google.com, and well, what happens technically when we do that? When we enter google.com, we press enter on our keyboard. We ask a question. Who's this google.com fellow? And that question gets asked all the way down to our ISP. ISP is Internet Service Provider, and I put a $sign up here, just so you know those are the people that you pay so you can have internet. So if you're in the States, that's Cogeco, Verizon. If you're in Canada, that would be Bell or Rogers. Or, depending on your country, you have your big companies that make a lot of money from internet usage. So they get that request and they send that off to something called the DNS server, so domain name servers. And we'll get into that later on in the course. So don't worry too much about it, but essentially it's a phone book that has the list of all these URLs like google.com, and it has the addresses of them. So exactly like a phone book, they know where google.com is. So they say, hey, I don't know Mr. Google.com personally, but I do know his address. So you should go check him out. So they send off that request back through the ISP, and the website or the web browser, Google Chrome in this case, gets 172.217.723. All right, cool, but nothing's showing up yet. There's no google.com. I can't do any searches yet. Okay, we received what we call an IP address. So think of this as something that every single computer has one. Anything that's connected to the internet has its own address. So the laptop that I'm working on right now has an IP address. Your laptop or computer has an IP address. So this IP address allows the internet to work essentially. It knows our location, our address. So what we do now with google.com, we know this IP address. The browser sends off another request to the Google servers, and it knows where the Google servers are because we have this address. So we go seek it out. And you can think of servers as computers, essentially. My laptop could be a server. Your computer could be a server. Servers are essentially computers that are sometimes in basements or in huge server farms. And they have a piece of software running that, just like at a restaurant where a server brings you food, it knows how to send you files when you request for them. So we send this off, and the Google servers say, oh, yeah, no problem. Let me give you my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we'll get into what those are later on in the course. But think of them as just text files. They're text files that Google is going to send to the browser so we can have Google working. So let me just minimize this and show you what it's doing. So we're copying these files, and Google server is saying, yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking for Google, here it is. And the web browser receives the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if we go to the next section, boom, we have google.com, and everything's working. Now, that sounded like a whole bunch of stuff that happened in between. And when we're on the internet, everything is quite fast. But yeah, underneath the hood, all of that is happening. And it's crazy to think how fast everything works. Don't take my word for it. Let's just check this process that I'm not just making stuff up for you. If what we learned was correct, technically, we can skip this process, right? I mean, if we know the address of Google, can we just, go into this directly and just, instead of putting in google.com, just put in this in our search bar and it automatically goes to the Google servers? Well, let's try it out. Let's open up Google here. And ooh, what a pretty picture. All right, so we go to google.com. Nothing crazy here. And that's great. But what if I, instead of that, I put in the IP address? So 172, there's no way I could remember this address. So I've done this before. And I press enter. Look at that, google.com. So as you can see, I'm not lying. It's what's happening. The IP address gets sent to the Google servers. Google servers send us a few files so that we can finally load google.com. In the next section, we're going to do something fun. We're going to break a bit of Google and toy around with the website again to show you how cool all of this technology is. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. In the last section, we talked about how we have google.com, and if we enter an IP address, we essentially get all these files from Google. So if we look back at the diagram that we had, we see here that the Google servers just send us a couple of files, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Again, something that we'll cover later on. But for now, based on that knowledge, we should be able to break Google. So let's play with something. If you open up Google Chrome and you go into View, then Developer, then Developer Tools, you're going to have a screen over here that pops up. You might want to move it up and down just so you can see better. Let me just scroll this down a bit so you can see. You'll see over here that there's a little icon on the left with a pointer and a window. If you click on that and now go to the website, you'll see it selects a bunch of different things. So it's just an element selector. So let's just click on this. So when I click on this, it takes me to the part of the HTML file that essentially tells Google to put in Google search here. So based on that, we can do something fun. We can get the value over here of Google search and let's change it to Andre search. Press enter. Look at that. We now just changed Google to have Andre search over here. That's very, very cool. I want you to play around with that and see what you can do. For example, if I now select this and I'm just like, I don't want this, I'm going to press the delete key and just delete it. Look at that. I can delete that. Okay, I don't like that either. I'm going to press delete on that as well. And let's see. You know what? I want the entire website. I want this entire body thing gone. Delete. Look at that. We just completely deleted Google. Now, you must be freaking out. What happened? Am I going to get sent to jail? I just deleted Google. Well, no, not really. Press enter and Google is back. Now, why is that? Well, if we go back to our diagram, we have Google servers and we were playing around with one of these files and we just modified it. We essentially just said delete, delete. So Google was gone. But when I made that request again, Google servers, no problem. We have these files. They send these files all over again back to the server. Hopefully that made sense to you. We see that the browser essentially is a tool, a piece of software that can receive files from servers and it knows how to read them so that, look at that, we get pretty Google and we can type in all the searches that we want in the world. All right, let's get to the next section where we talk about the internet backbone. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey there, welcome back. All right, if you thought so far everything's been really, really cool, well, things are going to get a lot cooler. We're going to be talking about the internet backbone. So we recognize this because I've been talking about it for the last couple of lessons. But some of you may have had a question that is, what do the arrows mean? I mean, it's kind of like magic, right? I just told you that we send off the IP address to the servers. The server responds with some files, but this is just magic. Like, what do these arrows mean? So we're going to talk about that in this lesson. And we're going to do that with this really, really fuzzy diagram that I found online from this website. It's not the clearest picture, but it actually has some really important things. So I want to use that to demonstrate to you what the internet backbone is. So some of you know the way we connect in our homes, at a coffee shop, or at work is we usually have Wi-Fi, or maybe sometimes we still have people that are using Ethernet cables and connecting through those. But for now, let's just focus on the fact that we have a home and we have Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi essentially gives us internet from the router. You can see this little person over here working hard with a router next to him. And this router is connected all the way to something called a modem. And this is something that if you ever signed up for internet or changed providers, you most likely had somebody come to your house and install something. And that's this box over here that essentially allows the ISP, the internet service provider, this big building over here, we remember that, to connect to it. So this modem has these signal towers that transmit signals of, google.com, and it receives these messages. And then this is why I picked this image, just because I think it's incredible. You see this wire that is connected all the way to the ISP, and then the internet service provider, the ISP, is connected to this magical blue cable that is the internet backbone. And something that's really important in this image is the fact that there's Wi-Fi, which is over the air, but at the end of the day, everything is kind of connected through cables. So some of you, or many of you, or all of you might be wondering, what the hell is this internet backbone thing? Sounds cool, but this kind of vexed. So I found a really, really cool thing that we can do together. I'll post this website in the notes after this lesson, but if you go over here, you actually see the internet backbone. So let's say we're in Brazil and we wanted to search google.com. Well, from Brazil, from our home, through Wi-Fi, it connects to our router, to our modem, and then all the way to our internet service provider. Let's say it's internet service providers over here. And then through cables, it connects all the way to, let's say, this point over here. And let's say for now that the Google servers are located somewhere in Portugal over here. Well, that signal of me looking for that IP address of Google and looking for those Google files is going to go through this submarine cable. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a physical cable that goes at the bottom of the seafloor from Brazil all the way to Portugal, where the Google servers are. And then the Google server says, yep, I got those files. Here they are. And sends it all the way back through the ISP, all the way back to our house. Isn't that cool that there's physical cables that are connecting and creating this internet? So, there are times where somebody destroys or something happens where these cable connections are cut off, and you sometimes lose internet connection that way. But yeah, the internet backbone is literally just this network all over the world of connected cables so that we can transfer these files all over the world. And just to show you how insane this is, somebody from the Opti project over here, I got this off of Wikipedia, mapped out in, I believe this was in 2015, just 30% of the network. And you can see over here that each one of these dots is an IP address. So a computer that is connected to another computer, that is connected to another computer. And that's the internet. The internet is just all these connected computers that are just transferring files between each other. And as web developers, and this is the coolest thing, and that's why I just think everybody should be a web developer, because it's so cool. You're allowing this to happen. You're allowing this transferring of files from one computer to another, transferring knowledge from Brazil to Portugal and all over the world. And you get to be part of it. You get to be part of this network, and you get to evolve. When this picture of the internet came to me, I knew that this was the career for me. So hopefully that gets you excited. In the next section, I'm going to show you something really cool, traceroute, before we finish up the lesson and we get into the next sections. So hope that was cool. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome back. We mentioned in the last lesson that we're going to be talking about traceroute. What is that? Well, I just wanted to finally get the entire picture of the internet across, and I think this is the best way to do it. Now, if you're on a Mac, you're going to press Command Space and look for a program that comes with your Mac called Terminal, and you're going to press Enter, and you're going to get this. So it's an application that all Macs have. If you're on a Windows machine, it's called command prompt. And in the exercise right after this lesson, I will show you instructions on how to access that as well. We're going to talk about trace route. And if you remember, we spoke about this image of all these connected things happening and going to the internet backbone, and then Google.com finally sends us the files back to our house. And you can actually monitor how that's going to work using traceroute. So if we type in traceroute, and on Windows machine, it's actually traceRT. But for now, we'll just go traceroute. And you can request for whatever website you want. So let's go with google.com. I press enter. And yep, look at that. It gave me a whole bunch of hops that it did. So you can see 1 through 9 here. So it did 9 hops. So that means 9 stops to this address at 172.117.1.14. So again, that looks like the IP address. So again, let's always test our experiments here. If I put that in and press enter, we should get google.com. Let's see. Look at that, google.com. So that's a fun little way of you to see where your requests go, and you can monitor. You can see all these IP addresses are different computers that are trying to locate the Google service. So go ahead in the next section. There's a little exercise. You can play around with this and just see where all your requests go all over the world. I think it's very, very cool. We're going to finish up in the next section with some fundamentals and what we can do with this knowledge that we have to actually become really good web developers. So see you in the next section. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Good job, you've made it this far. And you're probably asking yourself, Andre, this has been really good, really informative, but where's the coding? I want to start building some websites. And I know, we'll get there, don't worry. But without even realizing it, you just learned some really, really important fundamental skills and something that will take you very, very far in the career of a web developer, because now you know how to improve website performance without a single line of code. And just so you know, we're going to get a little silly here. We're actually going to make sure that you remember these fundamental skills every time throughout these lessons. There's going to be chunks and very important lessons. And to symbolize how important they are, I'm going to get Jean-Claude Van Damme's help. So again, this is an important lesson. This is an important fundamental web developer concept. So Jean-Claude Van Damme, how important is it? All right, so as you can see, very important concept. And what is it? Well, like I said, without writing a single line of code, you now know how to improve a website's performance. So let's think about this. There's 3 things. We send google.com, we talk to Google servers, and we get these files back. So just looking at this and looking at what you've learned so far, what's one thing that would make sure that this process would be fast? Let's look at the first one. I'm going to give you a second to think. Hopefully you get it. The first one is location of the server. We saw how big the internet backbone is. So if the servers are really, really close to you, let's say you're in the States and the servers are just a couple of kilometers away, that hop is going to be really, really fast versus if it's all the way across the globe. So location of the server is important. And we'll talk about these and how big companies use these to their advantage later on. So that makes sense. Let's look at the next one. So the next one is how many trips. So hopefully, ideally, we just have one trip to the Google servers and Google servers send us all the files that we need back. But as we know, there's new pages, there's searches. So this communication with Google is back and forth, back and forth. And the less trips we have, the faster that we'll be able to get the files. So how many trips? And then finally, size of files. Again, if this HTML file or CSS file or JavaScript file is massive and it's 100 megabytes, well, that's going to be a lot slower to transfer over the internet than it is if it was just a couple of kilobytes. So there it is. These 3 things are something that you'll take with you, and you'll realize that every time you're building an application, a website, you're going to be thinking about these things. And these are going to help you make sure that you have a performant, fast website. And we're going to take these with us as we go on throughout the course. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. And welcome back. In this final video, I want to show you what this course is all about, what we're learning in this course, and what we're going to be able to do at the end. You may have heard the term full stack developer, front-end developer, back-end developer. And looking at this diagram, you're starting to recognize that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you see React in there. We'll get to that. Don't worry about it. But that's what a front-end developer does. The front-end developer is the person who makes sure that when we open up the browser and go to google.com, that we see Google. We see it nice and pretty, laid out beautifully, has a search bar, and essentially anything that a user sees, the front-end developer does. And that is using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and a few other tools. The back-end developer, that's the person that works with the server, makes sure that when a browser speaks to it, it serves up those files, and it uses technology such as Node.js, Express.js, which we're going to get into. And then that server is going to talk also to a database. Again, we haven't really discussed that too much, but don't worry, there's going to be a section on it, and that's going to use PostgreSQL, and we're actually going to be learning that as well. So we want to build you up as a full stack developer to be able to work with all these technologies so that everything revolving around a web application you're able to build. So get excited. You're going to learn all of this. It looks overwhelming, but trust me, just like this, how the internet works section, it's all going to make sense. So I'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.